so we'll summarize what UCAS are now recommending in this podcast. But if people want to do it slightly differently, from a purely Cambridge perspective, we don't mind. Okay, so long as you give us the sort of bits of information that are helpful to us, we don't care if that comes in response to question 1 or question 2 or question 3. Now, other universities might view it slightly differently. So again, it might be wise, broadly speaking, to follow what UCAS are recommending. But from a purely Cambridge point of view, we don't really mind what people put in the 3 sections. And again, it might just be worth reminding people of what we've mentioned on the previous podcasts. When people apply to Cambridge, they also have to fill in an additional form called My Cambridge Application, and that contains an optional second personal statement. It's a bit shorter than the UCAS one. I think it's 1,200 characters rather than 4,000 characters. But that one is completely unstructured, so we don't predetermine the structure of that one. People can just tell us whatever they want to tell us about their interest in the course.
Hello everyone, welcome to Cambridge from the Inside. We're here with a returning guest.
So I'm Marcus I'm the Director of Admissions here at Trinity Hall, as usual.
Nice. And we're here to do a personal statement update. There's been some new information and guidance given by UCAS, and we're going to go through that to advise you for anyone who's writing their personal statement for the upcoming application. So Marcus, do you want to fill us in on that?
Yeah, so we've already recorded actually a couple of podcasts about personal statements. The most recent one we recorded was about the new format of the personal statement, and we recorded that some time ago. And then since we recorded that, UCAS has given a little bit more detailed information really about what they think people should include in the 3 subsections of the personal statement, because that's the change really. The personal statement used to be entirely unstructured. It was just for the applicants to decide how to structure what they present in it. Whereas now UCAS have said there are these 3 sections, and we'll go through them all again today. And they've now given more detailed information about the sorts of things people might want to consider in all of them. It's probably worth just briefly reminding people of some of the things we said on the previous video, actually the previous couple of videos, because basically none of the most important things have changed really. So from a Cambridge point of view, our main advice is still don't overthink the personal statement. And I know we're not sort of doing much to encourage that by doing yet another podcast on it. We may be giving the impression that this is absolutely crucial to someone's application. It isn't the most important part of the application. It's a useful source of information, but people really shouldn't overthink it, despite the fact that we seem to record a new podcast about it every few months. So the other thing that it's worth just reminding people is that we don't mark or score the personal statement. So we don't give them a mark out of 10 and rank order people on their personal statements. It really is just a useful source of information for us. So that hasn't changed. And the other thing that hasn't changed from a Cambridge perspective is that purely from our perspective as a university, we don't really mind what people put in these 3 sections. Okay, so we'll summarize what UCAS are now recommending in this podcast. But if people want to do it slightly differently, from a purely Cambridge perspective, we don't mind. Okay, so long as you give us the sort of bits of information that are helpful to us, we don't care if that comes in response to question 1 or question 2 or question 3. Now, other universities might view it slightly differently. So again, it might be wise, broadly speaking, to follow what UCAS are recommending. But from a purely Cambridge point of view, we don't really mind what people put in the 3 sections. And again, it might just be worth reminding people of what we've mentioned on the previous podcasts. When people apply to Cambridge, they also have to fill in an additional form called My Cambridge Application, and that contains an optional second personal statement. It's a bit shorter than the UCAS one. I think it's 1,200 characters rather than 4,000 characters. But that one is completely unstructured. So we don't predetermine the structure of that one. People can just tell us whatever they want to tell us about their interest in the course. So in some ways, that's why at Cambridge, we're not so focused on the UCAS personal statement, because people can choose to send us an additional one if they want to. Yeah. So all of those things that we've discussed in greater length on the previous podcast, those are all true. Yeah. So none of that has changed. But what we can do maybe is just go through the 3 new questions that UCAS have introduced, and we can just summarize the current advice from UCAS about what should be included in them, if that will make sense.
Yeah, nice. So just on the UCAS website now, and we're going to go through the 3 questions of where you'd have to answer and in order to write out your personal statement. So the first question is, why do you want to study this course or subject? That's quite a broad question. There's clear guidance here on UCAS. What are UCAS saying to students that you should put in as an answer for that question?
Yeah, so the advice coming from UCAS now is that that's a good place to say something about your motivation for wanting to study the course. We want to see that the people who are applying are genuinely interested in the subject they've applied for. So that's a good place to give some sort of indication of that. And as we've said again in previous podcasts, don't just assert it. Don't just say, I'm really passionate about engineering, or I'm really passionate about history, or whatever it is. We're going to assume that you're passionate about it because you're applying for it. So try to demonstrate your interest and understanding of the subject rather than just asserting that you're passionate about it. But something like that can maybe go in that section. I think the main thing that it would be useful to include in that section, so this is the response to the first question, is stuff to do with super-curricular activities. So if people have been studying particular topics that they're interested in independently of their schoolwork, so you'll be studying your A-level or your IB subjects or whatever, you'll have your school curriculum. If in addition to that you've been studying something just out of interest, doing a bit of independent research into it, then it would be useful to tell us something about that in response to that first question. That's where UCAS are now saying it would be good for the super-curricular stuff to go. So for many of the people who apply to Cambridge, that's likely to be a pretty large percentage of their personal statement. So I think with this new structure, it's likely that many of the personal statements we see will be quite top heavy. I think there'll be quite a lengthy response to the first question, a shorter response to the second question, and maybe an even shorter response to the third question, but we'll go through the other questions just in a second. The other thing that it might be useful to include in response to that first question, if it's relevant, is any thoughts you might have about your sort of future plans. For some people, that would be really clear. If they're applying for something like, I don't know, medicine, it might be because they really want to be a GP, and that might be very clear in their minds. For perhaps the majority of applicants, they might not be certain about that at all. People come to Cambridge and study, a particular subject, and they may have no clear idea what that's going to lead to at that point. That may become clearer as they go through the course. So again, don't feel obliged to say anything about future plans if you're really not particularly certain about your future plans. So yeah, I think in response to that first question, it's really the sort of super-curricular interests that should be the sort of primary focus.
Nice, yeah. I know, I think super-curricular interests is one of the main things Cambridge is looking for in a personal statement. So as you said, you'd imagine personal statements being quite top-heavy.
Yeah. And it might just be worth saying, again, we've mentioned this on previous podcasts, but just to remind people, the reason why we place emphasis on that is because it gives us an insight into whether the person applying has some of the skills that we're looking for. I mean, when people come here and study at Cambridge, they have a lot of support. You know, they work with their director of studies, with their supervisors, they attend lectures, so they've got lots of contact time. But nonetheless, they do have to be able to think and work independently. They have to make decisions about their own learning. And so seeing evidence of people doing that, even at this relatively early stage, just reassures us that someone, would have those skills, so that if we were to make them an offer, they'd come here and they'd really enjoy it, and they'd flourish and they'd thrive. So that's why we place emphasis on those super-curricular things.
Nice. So the second question is, how have your qualifications and studies helped you to prepare for this course or subject? So, I mean, how have your qualifications and studies is quite ambiguous. So in general, what are UCAS saying that you should put in for your answer for this question?
So I think the way they're wording it now, this is where they suggest people might mention things about the courses that they've studied at their school. So rather than the super-curricular stuff that they've been doing independently, if there's a subject, one of their A-levels or whatever it may be, that they're studying at school that's really caught their attention and really sort of triggered their interest, they could say something about that in that section. It's also a section where they might say something about any sort of competitions or something like that they've entered. So if they've entered something like a maths Olympiad or something like that, or maybe it was a competition in their own school, it doesn't have to be a sort of national thing. Anything like that, which kind of shows that they're taking their studies really seriously, to the point that they want to sort of compare themselves perhaps to other people in their school or more broadly. Anything along those kind of lines would be useful in that section as well. I think those are the main kind of things that it would be worth thinking about including.
Nice. And the last question is question 3. What else have you done to prepare outside of education, and why are these experiences useful? So also at face value, slightly vague, but what are UCAS saying for students to put as their answers for this question?
I think there's various things that can go in here, and I think what we'll do probably is include the link to the UCAS page in the description box, so people can go through this exhaustively themselves if they want to. But broadly speaking, I think in response to that third question, the sorts of things that UCAS are now encouraging people to mention are things like work experience. That won't be relevant for every subject, but certain subjects, do like to see some evidence of work experience if that's possible. The most obvious ones would be, say, medicine or veterinary medicine, to some extent engineering, although it's not obligatory by any means. If you've got some sort of work experience that you'd like to tell us about, that's a good place to mention that. I think the other thing that can go in that third section, in response to the third question, is anything that you want to tell us about extracurricular activities. So extracurricular as opposed to super-curricular activities. Again, from a Cambridge point of view, we're never super interested in that. We don't really want to see, the majority of the personal statement focusing upon extracurricular activities. But if in addition to doing your schoolwork and doing some super-curricular studies, you're also able to sort of manage your time well enough so that you can do some sporting thing regularly, or some musical thing, or some drama-based thing regularly, it gives us a bit of a glimpse of your time management. But broadly speaking, from a Cambridge point of view, we're less interested in the extracurricular stuff than we are in the super-curricular stuff. So this is what I meant earlier when I said I think these personal statements might be a little bit top-heavy, and that there'll be quite a substantial text in response to question 1, a shorter text in response to question 2, and then probably really quite a short text in response to question 3. And we should say that with this new structured personal statement, people do have to write something in response to all 3 questions. the minimum number of characters you need to write for each question is, I think it's 350.
Yep.
And so that's, just a couple of short sentences, a few short sentences. So you have to write 350 characters at least. But for something like question 3 here, it doesn't need to be much more than that. If you'd rather give the characters to the other 2 boxes, in response to the 2 other questions.
Nice. I think one take-home message I think should be for applicants is, if you have something that you want to write in your personal statement and you think it's be of real interest to the universities that you're applying to, but you're unsure of which box to put it in, you shouldn't then not put it in. You should put it in some. Better to put it in somewhere than
Absolutely
decide to not put it in at all because you don't know where it should be.
Exactly. The most important thing is that we get the useful information from the personal statements, it's much better to include it somewhere than not to include it at all. And of course, the advantage to including it in the UCAS personal statement is that it will go to all the universities that are being applied for. But if it's something that I don't know, you feel it's particularly relevant for your Cambridge application, but less relevant maybe for the other universities you're applying to, then you can include it in the Cambridge specific personal statement that I mentioned earlier. So, if you do have a few leftover bits and pieces that you can't squash into your UCAS personal statement, you can include them in your Cambridge specific personal statement if you want to. So you can use it as a bit of an overflow if you need to.
Yeah, and we've done a specific video called "What is my Cambridge application?" talking about the specific personal statement that's specific to Cambridge, called My Cambridge Application, talking about what would be useful things to write in that.
Yep.
And lastly, we could just go through what it says on the Cambridge University website. So this is as of 24th of July. On the Cambridge University website, it says, "We do not have a preference for how you split your personal statement between the 3 sections, but make sure you have enough space to talk in detail about your academic interests. You can include this in any section. If you have any information specifically for Cambridge, you can add this to the extra personal statement in My Cambridge Application."
Exactly.
So I think the broad consensus is there's some more guidance, but at the end of the day, you should include it somewhere and it'll be fine.
Exactly. That's right. And again, we can include links to all of these things in the description box so people can go through this carefully themselves. But and hopefully there won't be any more kind of changes around this before people apply in October. And if there are, we'll just do another podcast in which we clarify it. But I'm pretty sure this will stay as it is now until this coming admissions cycle has begun.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about this on different podcasts like Assessing Application, but just to really quickly state, is very rare. How often is it that someone isn't given an offer because of their personal statement?
I mean, I can't think of a single case. I mean, and I've been doing this for many years, like quite a few decades, and I can't think of a single case where it's been the personal statement that's been the main sort of problem. I can think of plenty of cases where someone maybe is sort of underperformed in, say, the admissions assessment and perhaps one of the interviews, and then when you put that together and you look at it all holistically, you think, I think given everything that we've got here, we probably shouldn't offer to that person. But I can't think of a single case where someone has, aced the admissions assessment, done brilliantly in the interviews and submitted, fabulous written work or whatever. But we thought the personal statement was a bit weak, so we didn't make them an offer. I mean, it just doesn't play that kind of role in the process. And it goes back to what I said earlier about, don't overthink it. Nothing really stands or falls solely on the personal statement. There there are other things that are more important, like trying to get the best possible marks you can in your school exams, and preparing carefully for the admissions assessment, and thinking a little bit about the interviews. And again, we have some podcasts giving lots of advice about interviews and how to prepare and what to expect and all of that. So spend a bit more time thinking about those things. The personal statement is a useful source of information, but we don't rank order people on the basis of it. We just don't treat it like that.
Nice. Amazing. Well, thank you, Marcus, for a quick update on the personal statement. If you have any questions, do leave them in the comments page. We're hoping to do more podcasts on admission stuff, but we have done a lot of podcasts on admissions content already. So do check out our admissions FAQs, which there's 3 podcasts, part 1, part 2, part 3, and you can see all of the questions that we went through on the comments page. As Marcus said, we've done a lot of podcasts on interviews for different subjects. They've done a podcast on the written work if your subject has written work. So do check out all of the admissions podcasts we already have.
And some of them are subject specific as well. So again, if you're interested specifically in law or specifically in natural sciences, we haven't got complete coverage of every single course yet, but we're trying to get there. But we have got subject-specific coverage for quite a few subjects.
Yeah, a lot of really good subjects. So do check them out on YouTube or your podcasting platform, and we'll see you guys next time. Oh, nice.
Fine, short and sweet, but
yeah, it was good.
There's no point going through everything exhaustively again, because it would just repeat. But I think that's useful.